discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Polly Middlehurst with the latest news. People should enjoy themselves at New Year, but exercise caution when celebrating. That's the advice from a senior government minister today. Gillian Keegan said people should go out and have fun to see in 2022, but take steps to limit their chances of catching the virus. New Year's Eve parties were given the green light in England yesterday after the government confirmed there'll be no new COVID restrictions before 2022. But a Labour MP has told GB News the picture is constantly changing because of new data.
Always looking to what will happen in the next week, the next 10 days, what will happen to admissions in hospital. Because, certainly in London, we are in a difficult place because 1 in 20 of us have got the virus, and that has a huge impact on the staff in our hospitals and our care sector. And also, I am sure that we all desperately want the schools to open next week. So it's really important that there's a plan to do that.
Meanwhile, Scotland's First Minister is warning COVID cases will continue to increase as the country experienced a record number of infections over the Christmas period. Nicola Sturgeon is urging people to get a booster jab if they haven't already and stick to social distancing measures. For the fourth consecutive day, over 8,000 positive cases have been recorded in Scotland. A peak of over 11,000 infections were recorded on Boxing Day. Meanwhile, business leaders want more support for the hospitality sector after the Omicron variant led to a sharp drop-off in trade in the run-up to Christmas. British Chambers of Commerce President Baroness McGregor Smith wants business rates relief and the emergency rate of VAT extended beyond the end of March. She's also calling for a focused furlough support scheme. International news now, and 2 staff from the charity Save the Children are among at least 35 people who've been killed in Myanmar on Christmas Eve. Government soldiers rounded up a group of people in a village before fatally shooting them. The charity says the 2 workers were travelling back to a nearby office when they got caught up in the attack. They've called on the UN Security Council now to respond. And in the United States, the judge in the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell is urging the jury to work slightly longer hours as COVID cases rise in New York. She says an astronomical spike caused by the Omicron variant means there's an increasing risk that jurors and participants may need to quarantine. Ghislaine Maxwell is on trial in the States, accused of luring young girls to be abused by Jeffrey Epstein. She denies all the charges. That's your news update. I'm back in an hour with more.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead now to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking cloudy and wet for many, though across Scotland frost and patches of fog. So tonight's rain then continuing across the southwest to start tomorrow with some heavy bursts at times. A windy morning with coastal gales, though remaining mild with temperatures at around 11 Celsius. The rain in the southwest pushing up across the southeast through tomorrow morning. Strong winds, particularly along English Channel coastlines where gales are possible. And a wet start tomorrow across Wales with widespread cloud and rain, some of which may be heavy at times and windy, particularly along coastlines. A dry start for some in the northwest of England, though becoming increasingly wet and windy through the morning, with rain moving in from the southwest, which will be heavy at times, remaining fairly mild though. Heading to the northeast of England, it's going to be dry there, but a cool start to the day, though rain will build in later and temperatures will rise as mild air pushes in from the southwest. Across Scotland, a cold start to the day with a frost and patches of fog at first. Cloudy, wet and windy conditions moving in across the south though through the morning. Wet and cloudy across Northern Ireland tomorrow morning with heavy outbreaks of rain. Windy, but particularly along northern coasts where even gales are possible, becoming increasingly mild though. And that's how the weather's shaping up during tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Well, what a sporting year 2021's been. Lockdowns came and went, but then once the fans were allowed back in, the action didn't disappoint. England had us all dreaming of 1966 and all that, as the Three Lions made their first major final in a lifetime. But the Italians, and unfortunately a fair few idiot fans, were there to spoil the party for all of us. The Tokyo Olympics may have been 12 months later than planned as well, but that was certainly well worth the wait. There was gold galore for Team GB as the Japanese put on a spectacular show. The British and Irish Lions took on the Springboks in what was surely the strangest tour of all time, and they got battered. And speaking of batterings, Anthony Joshua went from heavyweight to paperweight. But what about Tyson Fury? Very different story for the Gypsy King. And the Formula One season was one for the ages, with the duel in the desert finally deciding the fate of the championship. All that and so much more coming up over the next hour here on Sporting Heroes and Villains 2021. Well, sports broadcaster Aidan McGee is with us. Aidan, lot to go through. I mean, it's been a great year. I mean, with all the lockdowns and the worries, and it could have been a disaster, but there's been some great sport, hasn't there, this year?
Yeah, there has. We're British. We made the best of the situation. And then we were chatting backstage, weren't we, about how I think we'll look back at that period where there were no fans, and we'll discuss as we go on how it affected various different sports. But we look back at the period where there were no fans, and I think in years to come, when we look back at that, it will look absolutely barren. There were people wondering how on earth we continued. But for a while there, we got used to it, didn't we?
We did get used to it. But let's talk about Euro 2020, which of course happened in 2021. And I mentioned earlier, you know, when it comes to England, we haven't done anything since 1966. I don't know whether we look back on this as the success that it was. I think back of semi-finals over the years, and I think of us, even when we think of Italian 90, going back a long way, everybody remembers everything about the penalties, remember all the games. Is it me, or are we looking back on Euro 2020 and it's seemed that it wasn't as great as maybe we should see it as?
Well, I think there are a few reasons for that. First of all, the tournament crashed to an end with the disappointment of the penalties. We all want to move on from that very quickly. The league season almost started very soon. Some of the players were back in training with their clubs soon after, and that's because the schedule in all sports was condensed to some degree. But I know what you're saying. I just look at the final and I think to myself, it's almost like England found themselves in a position that they thought, wow, we've never been in this before. Yeah. We've played expansive football throughout the tournament. We're up against a decent side, but we think we can, based on our defensive record, hold out against Italy and stop them scoring. And almost like, I wouldn't say throwing the towel is not the right way to describe it. It was obviously a very competitive game, but having taken the lead through Luke Shaw's goal after 2 minutes, it seemed to me that Gareth Southgate made the decision to regress the team and go defensive in an effort to protect something that, let's face it, would have allowed him to make history on behalf of England for the first time, as you said in the top there, since 1966. What it did, though, was reignite my faith in international football. Mm-hmm. We're fed up with international football, and sometimes, aren't we? Because we see substandard opponents. We've seen it since the Euros.
But we love a tournament.
We love
the finals of a tournament. It's one thing.
That's what I mean.
When we have those, we have the qualifiers. But in a tournament, it's a different.
We've had some disappointing ones in the last 20 years, though. Let's be perfectly honest. The last two have been pretty decent. Yeah. But this one was quite good. Nothing ignites the English public, or the British public even, if you include all the four nations, like a national tournament, an international tournament. No, nothing else. It's not Liverpool or Man United or Chelsea or Tottenham. None of those teams. It doesn't make the fans go out and buy barbecues from Tesco's, does it? Whereas international football does.
Speak for yourself, Aidan, but I've got loads in the garage. But do we look at it as a success? I mean, obviously we've got to build on this, the Euros, and we've got, this time next year we're going to be looking at the World Cup. Yeah. And how much of what we've seen, is it down to the players or is it down to Gareth Southgate? Because people have complained about Gareth, and like you said about the tactics in the final, that maybe we could have actually gone for the killer blow and instead of sitting back and playing the Italians at their own game. But we've got to look at it.
Yeah, well, look, we have to look at it as a success because we haven't been to a final since 1966, obviously. However, some people might say, well, those players, maybe we could have achieved a little bit more. But then I prefer to look to next year when, with the recent experience of that tournament and the heartbreak as well, the players don't look affected by it. They haven't been coming out giving interviews saying that, we've been psychologically scarred by this. Most players look back at that tournament and think it was a positive experience. I had a chat with someone recently, and I think they've got a real chance England of winning the World Cup next year. It just depends how they can handle the conditions, of course, but the stadiums will be air-conditioned. Sure. I don't think Italy will be quite as good next time as they were this time. They've got a more senior squad. One or two of those will probably drop off the radar, you would think, by the time that tournament comes around. England, meanwhile, are going from strength to strength. Yeah. You look at the youth, the average age of that squad, it's actually quite low. You're actually going to get a situation where you've got players who are around about 23, 24, 25, who may have 40 caps under their belt by the time we take on that tournament. So I think it bodes well for the future. If you look at cycles as well within international football, if you look at, say, the German cycle in the 2000s, so they really sort of started to show their potential around about 2006. They probably, they started getting into finals and semi-finals for a sustained period of time, but couldn't quite get themselves over the line to win that trophy. They managed it in 2014, 8 years later. Sometimes a really successful period, with the exception possibly of Spain winning three tournaments in a row, which is really exceptional. You might see just one tournament come out of England, and we'd be absolutely delighted with that, wouldn't we?
We've been waiting a very long time.
We have.
And you talk about being cyclical, but I guess it is, and we've seen the golden generation, and that was a disaster, let's be honest.
Well, it was,
we have the players, we have the manager in place. We already have the experience of getting to a final now, so it's just getting over the line. And also, it's not like the players aren't winners. I mean, we've got players that have certainly won plenty of trophies.
You've got players. You've got serial Phil Foden. You can't necessarily get in the team every time. So you're going to have players like that. I mean, every generation of every country has players who couldn't get in the side. Remember David Schindler not being able to get in the France side back in the late 90s, so it meant he wasn't able to be part of the France 98 World Cup winning squad. However, that's by the by, really, because I think there's enough players there to fill those positions to carry the fight to anybody. It's the most confident I've felt about an England team. And if they're good for a period of 7-8 years but only win one tournament, I think that would be huge for this country, and huge for the manager as well. If you think that he came from nowhere, he came on the blind side, really, to get that job. Nobody was talking about Gareth Southgate. He hadn't been even near a decent club job, or any club job, since 2008 or 2009 when he left Middlesbrough. Sure. And he comes from nowhere and takes over from Sam Allardyce after what happened there, and takes this side to unprecedented scales, really, because if you think about it, even the semi-final in the World Cup in Russia was a hell of an achievement when you think about it.
Well, it's not a bad record. If we look at it, it's not a bad record so far.
18 years since Italia 90.
OK, well, that's England, so it looks well for the future. But domestically, I mean, we've got to look back on 2021 and some of the success stories. For me, if we're looking at managers, Thomas Tuchel. Now, Thomas Tuchel has come from PSG and he's had arguments with the board there and it wasn't working out for him. We know what happened with Frank Lampard. It was the prodigal son comes into Chelsea. Should have worked, probably too inexperienced. Tuchel comes in, completely turns it round in such a short space of time. And a huge success.
Absolutely. I mean, Lampard gave an interview the other day saying that in any other circumstances, the Derby County manager wouldn't go and take over at Chelsea. So I think that was his kind of admission that possibly the job came too early. In his position, you really got to take it, though, if it's offered. Then Tuchel comes in almost exactly a year ago from today, and he takes over. They get a couple of draws in their first, or they drew at Wolves in their first game, 0-0. But the turnaround from what was perceived to be we didn't believe it was an underperforming squad at the time, did we? And then we certainly realised that, yeah, it was. And then he takes over, they start getting results in January and February, the league form improves, he gets them into the top four. Of course, he gets them to the FA Cup final as well, where they lose narrowly to Leicester City. And then, of course, that Champions League run was something else. I mean, who would have thought? I mean, there were three meetings with Manchester City who were looking imperious around sort of December, January, February. They beat them in the league game. They knocked them out of the semi-final of the FA Cup. And then, of course, the final of the Champions League, where I have to say they scored an early goal. But they looked very, very comfortable throughout. And the turnaround with I did one of his first interviews on Zoom in my dining room, funnily enough, at home. And he's one of the more welcome guests I've had in my dining room over the last 20 years.
OK, well, that's nice to know. Yeah.
And so we had
he did overstay his welcome, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
OK,
not necessarily. But he was good. He was a good chat, but he hadn't done anything in English football by that point. He came close, don't forget, last year or the season before with PSG in the Champions League final.
But hold on, let me ask you then. So, we've got managers that are coming over from Germany. Of course, Jurgen Klopp is very successful.
Yep.
And, of course, now Ralf Rangnick has moved into Manchester United. But as far as Tuchel is concerned, what is it that seems to have fit? Is there sometimes this just a fit? It's just lucky, because sometimes you get clubs that seem to, well, I mean, if we look at Spurs, have brought various managers in that seem like they should be great, but it just doesn't work. Was this just the perfect fit? There is luck involved that when you get a manager?
Look, the stars have to align, but every time I talk to Harry Redknapp about management and the success that he achieved, he said it's the easiest job in the world when you've got good players. Now,
of course,
that's oversimplifying it to some degree when it comes to Tuchel, because, yes, he did have good players, but those players weren't performing. I think what top managers do, and it was always the case, Alex Ferguson used to do it, he puts pressure on his senior players. He doesn't allow his senior players to get comfortable thinking that they will be the first names on the team sheet every week. It's not as simple as that anymore. He's also not afraid. Remember, Luis Felipe Scolari used to pull the players off every time. Big Phil, he used to pull the big name players off if they weren't performing. Tuchel does that at Chelsea as well. He's not afraid to hook somebody if they're not performing to his standard, if they're not running enough, if they're not closing down enough, if they're not operating as a team, moving forward together, moving backwards together as well. And I think that's a key thing. Whether that style of management lasts too far into the future, we don't really know, because he's been at quite a few clubs now, and there is a trend around Europe now where managers are settling at clubs for not too long. It's almost like a merry-go-round. You look on their CV, they've all managed the same clubs at different times.
Well, they're going for the big ones, of course they are.
Well, but big payoffs as well.
But as far as talking about a big manager at big clubs and from Barcelona and then at Man City and Pep Guardiola, do you feel that maybe 2022 is the year that they're going to win the Champions League? Because it's the only thing that's missing at that club. And they say, it doesn't really matter, it's all about winning the Premier League for us. They've got those under their belt. They were terrific last season. It's got to be about the Champions League. And what do they have to do to actually get there? They've got to be asking themselves that question.
It's strange, because in 2011, I was at Wembley working when Pep Guardiola's Barcelona side dismantled a very good Manchester United team at Wembley. If you'd said to me that night, as I was poring over this football and thinking, wow, this is one of the best teams I've ever seen, you'd said to me that in 11 years' time, Pep Guardiola won't have won a Champions League in that period, I'd have said you're absolutely barking mad. But he's got closer. He's got to a final. He's been to a couple of semi.
What's going wrong? The players are there.
Yeah.
He's there. Is it almost? Can you actually want something too much? And it just seems to be slipping away from
possibly. But then Jurgen Klopp took a couple of goes in European finals to finally win that Champions League with Liverpool, didn't he?
Pep's already got one though.
He's already got two. He's already got two. But I don't think the problem is the players. I mean, look, the tactics were wrong in that final against Chelsea.
Yeah.
He changed them because he felt that the previous two games, which had been the previous month against Chelsea, he'd lost them because they were playing the same tactics as they were doing in the Premier League, and he changed it again. But once again, Tuchel outwitted him. Now, if they face Chelsea again, which is possible because the Premier League is so dominant in the Champions League at the moment, of course, well, at least he's got the fact that he beat him earlier in the season in the Premier League back in September at Stamford Bridge. Maybe that's a psychological determining factor that might make a difference later on in the rounds.
Who would even think maybe a game of football would break out in the middle of this psychological warfare as well? You never know. You never know. Let's mention, though, the Championship. And one of the great stories from 2021 surely has got to be Brentford. You know, new stadium, and then there was the lockdown and they couldn't move the supporters in there. But it almost fit perfectly because they didn't go up when it was finished. And now, with lockdown over with and fans being able to go and watch them, they get to go to that new stadium. And what a great start. You know, they beat Arsenal very early on and they're doing very well. How long it's going to last, but it's a great story for Brentford, isn't it? Everybody loves
August
Brentford.
2020.
Even as a Queen's Park Rangers fan, of course you love Brentford as well.
Let's not reveal that. I've seen us take a good few hidings from them in the last 5 or 6 years, but home and away. But I think back to August 2020 and they played our QPR's other rival, Fulham, in the final. That was a crushing blow for Brentford. They were just slight favourites in that final, just on the basis of having finished a little bit higher up than Fulham in the league. They took it to the last day, didn't they? They lost at home to Rotherham. And so I look at that and I thought that's really difficult sometimes to get yourself off the floor. And they did it. And they almost got automatic promotion again this time. They weren't far off. They had a little bit of a stutter around just after Christmas, around February, March time, but they pulled it together and they got up. And yeah, the stadium was great because this season they've been able to carry the momentum. It'd been horrible going into that stadium, Paul, when it's all done, it's all looking shiny and new, but nobody's in there. It's just coverings over seats and no atmosphere. I think that's generally helped them this season at home. Their home form has been very good. They got a couple of decent away results as well. Yeah, so an interesting story, but I suppose you'd have to look at Norwich as well. I mean, getting back, they suffered a cruel blow the previous season. And Watford as well.
Yeah, of course.
So it was a triumph for all three of those clubs. It was a triumph of that word again, psychology.
It is.
Coming back, getting yourself off the floor and going again.
And finally, looking forward to 2022, as far as the Premier League is concerned, is it the top four going to be broken, you think?
I think the top four could possibly be broken by West Ham, but I don't think they'll be involved in the title race. They're just a little bit short of that, even though David Moyes has done a fantastic job. But there's only 2 points separating the top three as we speak, as of now. I've never known, as we go into 2022, a title race to be that close at this stage. I'm thinking back to maybe 98, 99 when Man United won the treble, Arsenal were just behind them, Chelsea just below that. People forget that in that title race, Chelsea were in it until a week before the end of the season. It could easily have gone their way, and they drew at home to Leicester 2-2. But at the moment, in terms of that'd be great. If you got those three teams, Chelsea, Manchester City and Liverpool, going for the title at this stage, I think most neutral observers would accept that because I don't see any of them falling away, not significantly. I think that nobody's an outlier in there. Nobody's going into the new year thinking, can we just hang on by our coattails? All three of those squads have had money spent on them and they're looking very, very strong, and they've yet to play each other in the second half of the season yet, obviously. So there can be some fireworks to come with that.
Great, thanks, Aidan. Plenty more football to come then in 2022.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
So what an amazing season of Formula One it's been. It's been the closest title race. Well, we're looking since 1974. 24-year-old Max Verstappen's come through. It looked like he was way in the lead, then Hamilton comes back, and then, of course, the duel in the desert, and Max Verstappen's the champion.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say about this that sometimes the champion is just so difficult to depose. And he's managed to go and do it. What's been interesting about this race is just the duel of the personalities, the cult of the personalities. We've been talking for a long time now about the strength of the cars, the quality of the technicians, the track conditions. This is about personalities. This is a duel. They've been shunting each other.
This is going back. I mean, this is going way back.
Yeah,
this is what it's all
this
about.
is igniting. I mean, this rivalry could go on for quite a long time now. I mean, we think back to Senna and Prost in the 80s, Hunt and Lauda in the 70s as well. More recently, Hill and Schumacher, of course. So I think we can look forward to that.
Absolutely. What a season it has been. Our Formula One correspondent, Rosanna Tennant, has got the story of one of the greatest title battles of them all.
The 2021 Formula One World Championship had it all. Crashes, chaos and controversy from start to finish. At the pre-season test back in March in Bahrain, it looked like the defending champions Mercedes were on the back foot and that Red Bull had the faster car. But over the course of the season, Mercedes managed to mount a challenge and eventually took their 8th consecutive title at the weekend in Abu Dhabi. Team principals Toto Wolff for Mercedes and Christian Horner for Red Bull had their fair share of the limelight over the season, often debating the rules, challenging the legality of the other's car and discussing the behaviour of their respective drivers. And the Drivers' Championship was equally contentious, with defending and 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, looking for his first ever world title, making the headlines weekend in and weekend out. They battled from the start of the season in Bahrain, but things really started to unravel at the British Grand Prix, where they both collided and Max Verstappen crashed out of the race. Tensions boiled over again at the Italian Grand Prix in Monza, where they ended up on top of each other, both drivers having to retire from the race and Max Verstappen being given a penalty, given he was seen to be more at fault. But by the time Formula One left Mexico at the beginning of November, it looked like Max Verstappen was in control of the championship. But that reignited the fire in Lewis Hamilton. And after an incredible performance in Brazil, where he overcame essentially a 25 grid place penalty across the weekend, he set about mounting a challenge to Max Verstappen. And that set the tone for the coming races. Lewis Hamilton went on to win at Qatar and at Saudi Arabia, where once again Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton collided. This time, Max braking a little excessively and Lewis Hamilton running into the back of his car. So after Saudi Arabia, we headed into the final race of the season, the 22nd race of the longest ever season, with the two drivers fighting for the title level on points, both drivers with 369.5 points. Max Verstappen took a shocking pole position, but Lewis Hamilton took the lead of the race into turn 1. And from there, it looked like Lewis was going to take not only the race victory, but also his 8th World Drivers' title. But a late safety car in the race turned the race into one of the most bizarre scenarios we've seen in Formula One. Max Verstappen retook the lead of the race on the last lap and took the race win and his maiden world title, to the delight of the Dutch fans who travelled to Abu Dhabi to support him, but not to the delight of Mercedes, who after the race lodged 2 protests. Several hours after the race finished and the season had effectively ended, those protests were dismissed, crowning Max Verstappen officially the World Drivers' Champion. And whilst it was Red Bull and Max Verstappen and Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton who made most of the headlines this year, there were stories up and down the grid. Ferrari mounting a comeback and taking P3 in the constructors' standings ahead of McLaren, who in turn took the only 1-2 of the season at the Italian Grand Prix, Daniel Ricciardo taking the win ahead of his teammate, British driver Lando Norris. George Russell also took his maiden podium and announced that he'd be joining the Mercedes team next year to partner Lewis Hamilton. So it's been an exciting season, one like no other. And the best news is it all starts again for the 2022 season at the end of February when we go testing in Barcelona and then the first race in Bahrain at the beginning of March.
Well, the Olympics in the summer nearly didn't happen, but thank goodness it did. It was a very successful Olympics for Team GB and a very exciting one, even though there was a lack of crowds from over here. Aidan, are you a fan of the Olympics? I could see the look in the eye before I'd even said that.
I'm not a huge fan of it, no. Not because I think that the sport is substandard or anything. I just think that there's too much politics around Olympics historically. That's not necessarily the fault of the athletes. In fact, it's usually nearly always not. What I would say, though, is that, yes, Team GB have improved exponentially over the last 15 to 20 years, but it's no fairy tale. I mean, they've got substantial lottery funding, which other nations competing at the event don't have. Having said that, I can still sit down and watch some of it. And again, it was a
hold on. This is not about lottery funding. This is about talent. This is about sporting excellence. If we look at Adam Peaty, for example, Adam Peaty has done something that no swimmer has ever done. This is not just about funding.
It's not just about, no.
100-metre breaststroke. He wins gold medal for the second time. The first British swimmer to actually win on consecutive Olympics. World records just fall every time he swims. And this man is a machine.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm not saying that the lottery funding is the be-all and end-all, and there are plenty of people out there who lavish praise, as you've just done, on Adam Peaty. I'm just regressing slightly because I just think that sometimes if you give these nations... See, the difference is with that funding, they're allowed to attract competitors who might drift off to other sports. Now, other countries... they still have that problem. They're losing competitors to other sports because historically Olympic sports aren't particularly well paid. I interviewed, I think it was Steve Backley back about 10 years ago, and Jonathan Edwards as well. And he said we were basically like entrepreneurs. We had to go around and find our own fitness coach, our own nutritionist. We had to find our own training conditions.
But that makes it all the more impressive, doesn't it?
Well, it does. It makes it all the more impressive, yeah, but that's the whole point. They were doing it without the lottery funding. That generation were, and they still won medals. Now, yes, they're winning medals now, Team GB. It was John Major's government who put that in place, and it's huge. At least the investment has yielded rewards. We're no longer going to Olympics like we were in 2000 with Sydney, and being embarrassed. That was the epiphany. That was the moment where we decided as a nation that we needed to devote more funds towards it.
Let's celebrate the good stuff, shall we? Let's talk about the good stuff. So Adam Peaty, for me, out of this world, just unbeatable. And you can even say, this could be the one where he gets beaten. Even he knows that. And he's absolutely certain that every time... I've never met anybody like it. Just the most driven individual, I think, in sport or in life that I've ever met. Laura Kenny as well. And Katie Archibald, golds for them. Laura Kenny, another three Olympics on the trot where she's won gold.
You can look at the table. The US finished top with 39 golds. China second, 38. Japan, 22nd. GB, don't forget there's obviously those other countries... and some more athletes, so it's doesn't necessarily tell the full story. But 22 golds, 65 medals in total. They've got to be happy with that. I think it's a terrific return.
It is, and also we should mention the training because there was a lot of training that was disrupted in the months and, year or so that was leading up to Japan. It was difficult to go out there. They wouldn't have the usual Olympic experience. So many Olympians, they love the Olympic experience because, of course, you got the Olympic Village and the training facilities, everything, but, they're pretty much cooped up where they are, or they would fly in, their event would take place, and then they're away again. So it's not like any other Olympics that there's ever been.
Also, I spoke to Chris Hoy When would it have been? Probably around about March time. And even by then, we weren't sure whether the Olympics was going to actually take place. And he said, well, that plays havoc with your preparations anyway. If you don't actually know that it's happening, you put in a really good shift of training over a week or 10 days, whatever, and at the end of it, you're thinking, it's the psychological damage it can do to you. If you think, well, actually, I put this in, I'm the best I can ever be, and yet we're not actually knowing if the show's going to go ahead. There's also the element of the athletes who feed off the crowd. We've all seen athletes down the years, we've seen people competitors in all sports who thrive off the atmosphere of the crowd. And obviously that wasn't going to be there. So that plays into it as well. So don't get me wrong, I do think they did well to put on a decent show, everybody who competed. But again, it's the funding that annoys me. I know we're meant to be talking about the good stuff.
Stick with the good stuff. What's with you today? Let's enjoy the good stuff. It was a good return, but if we talk about maybe not quite so good stuff and talk about lottery funding and how much goes into it, as far as athletics concerned, which has always been our bread and butter, we look at Super Saturday going back to 2012. Not so good. It wasn't so good. We had Keely Hodgkinson, who I thought is a great athlete for the future in the 800, winning silver. She was terrific, only 19 years old. But we didn't have any golds, did we?
No, that's right. Did you like the element of comedy when the US 4x1 relay team didn't actually make the final?
Yes, let's face it, we always enjoy that.
And then prompting that angry tweet from Carl Lewis.
Yes, exactly.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Well, listen, what it's year, it's certainly been on the tennis court for Novak Djokovic, coming so close to that calendar Grand Slam, to the rise of Emma Raducanu. Top tennis commentator and friend of the show, Ravi Uber, serves up his spin on the past 12 months.
So my first player has to be Novak Djokovic. Now, Novak, I know he can polarize opinions, but what he did on court this season was almost unprecedented. He was one match win away from becoming the first man since 1969 to win all four majors in one season. That was Rod Laver. So I think to be able to withstand that pressure just to get to the final of the US Open was a terrific accomplishment. And I know we love to have these debates about who is the best among the big three. Well, if you look at Novak's numbers, and just numbers, because I know people can say, well, how about the style of play, what they bring to tennis, the intensity. But just on the numbers, you can't really argue with the fact that Novak is number one because he has a winning record against Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal, most weeks at number one. Rafa never been in this position before, one win away, one Grand Slam away for winning all four in one season. And don't forget, Novak did win 4 in a row, majors-wise. That was a couple of years ago, spread over 2 campaigns. Number 2 has to be on the women's side, Emma Raducanu. I mean, if Novak, what he accomplished was exceedingly rare, I'm not sure in our lifetimes if we're ever going to see a player do what Emma did at the US Open. Come through the qualifying, win a Grand Slam, and doing so without dropping a set. Absolutely phenomenal. And now all eyes are going to be on 2022 for her. And I hope she does have the time to develop and grow, because she's still coming to terms with playing at this level really for the first time. And she has a very experienced coach alongside now in Torben Beltz, who used to work with another Grand Slam winner, Angelique Kerber. Number 3 for my heroes, Cam Norrie. I mean, his season was off the charts. To finish last year at number 71 in the world, this year to be number 12, I mean, tells you what kind of a season he had. He made 6 finals, winning his first 2 titles. And to give you some context and perspective, yes, there may have been some bigger finals for Novak, but Novak played in 7 finals, so Cam was number 6. Now he's going to have to go about trying to back it up in 2022, but I think he got tremendous motivation from playing at the year-end championships as an alternate, so I think that's going to serve him well for next season.
Well, thanks to Ravi there. There's only one name really for us, isn't there, as far as tennis is concerned? 19 years old, Emma Raducanu. She goes to Wimbledon. Doesn't quite work out for her there. I mean, the thing is, before we get to the US Open, as far as Wimbledon's concerned, it was so much pressure on her because nobody had even heard. Let's face it, people that weren't tennis stalwarts hadn't really heard of her.
I live in Bromley, so I've known about
so
her.
You'd seen her playing at the local courts.
Yeah,
you would have known her.
Yeah.
For us on the other side of London, that maybe we didn't. But she was doing well at Wimbledon, and then so much pressure. And I think the pressure that was heaped on her, because all of a sudden TV say, we're not going to run EastEnders, we're going to put Emma Raducanu on prime time on TV, and whatever anybody says, and I'm sure she'll admit to it, it was just a little too much for her, wasn't it? And it's not a surprise.
Yeah, I know, given her age as well. It's a huge stage for any player to take on. There have been British players down the years. Tim Henman was one who, he did well at Wimbledon, couldn't quite take the final step, but he also performed probably better in some ways outside of Wimbledon. He reached semi-finals at the US and the Australian. But, I mean, it might have been the same with Raducanu, young player, too much too soon. And there was criticism, of course, externally, wasn't there, on social media from Piers Morgan, which didn't look good. And I think that allowed her in some ways to step back from that. Nobody was talking about her.
It did have a basis of truth, though, didn't it? Yeah. Everybody was very careful around her and tiptoeing around Emma Raducanu. Understandable, 19-year-old, she's thrusted into the spotlight, but it was too much to ask. And whether it be a panic attack or whatever happened, the pressure is going to get to you because, she was doing really well, started losing, and then it's thinking, hold on, this is the whole world is closing in on me. And then it was almost when she went out to the States and then she's playing at Flushing Meadows, there was a new freedom to her.
I know.
And it was just an incredible tournament.
But what I'm saying is nobody going into the US Open was talking about her, really, were they? And I think that if the pressure is the issue, then that's the one thing you don't want. You don't want people talking about you going into it. And I think that helped her perform in the final. I mean, it was a pretty much flawless tournament all the way through.
Let's talk a little bit about cricket. Now, cricket, a huge year for cricket because the thing is, there's so many different events. Of course, we've talked about the Olympics being moved and also the Euros being moved. The other thing that was moved was the future of cricket, and that's the 100. Now, did you get to go and see any games, and what did you make of the new format, though?
No, I didn't go to see any. I did speak to somebody who's well into his cricket, and, he's not sitting too far away from us right now, actually, behind that glass, but he had all sorts of doubts about it. We've seen it in lots of different sports down the years. Where,
I think I may know who you're talking about.
So it's not... Sometimes we want the sport to be made... Marketeers, for example, TV companies, they want the sport to be broken down into kind of chunks that are more palatable to a new audience. That's how you get new people in. We've seen it in darts, we've seen it in snooker, we've seen it in various other sports. And it's an attempt to modernise in a way. Sometimes you can compromise some elements of the long form of the game. But with the 100, for example, I mean, 510,000 tickets sold in the entire competition. The attendance of the women's event was the biggest ever seen for a global women's event.
Well, the thing is, this is what was great about it, is because they doubled up. You'd have the women's game and then you'd have the men's game straight after that. And the amount of girls that you'd see at cricket, which you normally wouldn't see, which was fantastic. The amount of kids that were there, families that were going there, it was easily accessible as far as prices. It wasn't ridiculously expensive.
I think people were surprised by how good it was.
It was quick. And the thing is, you hit absolutely the nail on the head as far as I'm concerned. is that you've got to make sure that you balance it with what's gone on before. You can't revolutionise. Again, it's that old evolution, not revolution.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a new idea, but
it
still
also
you've got to take everybody with you.
It hasn't compromised the longer form of the game either, has it? I mean, we're still enthralled by the Test match.
Some would say the county championship it may have compromised a little bit.
Maybe, but then I look back at the county
things
championship. I look at the county championship going back over 10, 15 years, and there are too many matches there played in front of two men and a dog.
That's
so
right.
that tells you that the interest in that probably isn't as great. But then again, in cricket and in rugby to a degree as well, we always look at the international game rather than the club game, don't we? As the light carrier, if you like.
OK, and finally, one quick word, and that's on England, of course. We're around Ashes time as well. Successful summer for England, or not really?
No, I would say not really. I don't think they look prepared going to the Ashes. I mean, I think they're too reliant on Joe Root. He's posted some superb numbers. I mean, he's on course to beat Michael Vaughan's record in a season in a calendar year for England, 1,481 runs. I think he'll smash that.
And one more quick thing, and that's T20 as well. Finalists, shame we weren't talking about us winning the T20 World Cup, which I assumed we would be, of course, knocked out the semi-final. And it's Australia again, isn't it? But we don't want to go on too much about Australia. So this should have been, is it a shoulda, coulda sort of thing here? Could have been the year where we finally saw Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury slug it out for that undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. It was the fight that everybody wanted to see, but they couldn't get it on. But whilst they both had big moments in the ring, for very different reasons, we'll have to wait a little while longer for the fight that everybody wants, if it's going to happen at all. So what were the biggest bouts of the year? Tom Gray from Ring Magazine can tell us right now.
OK, boxing heroes of 2021. Sonny Edwards defeated the #1 flyweight in the world, Moruti Fellaini, to win the IBF Championship. Awesome performance by Edwards. Josh Taylor made history by becoming the undisputed junior welterweight champion of the world at the expense of Jose Ramirez out in Las Vegas. Chantel Cameron became the unified junior welterweight champion of the world, making history for the women's game, and also captured the inaugural Ring Magazine Championship. Finally, Tyson Fury with a great performance against Deontay Wilder in their third fight. One of the greatest heavyweight slugfests of all time. So that's your heroes. In terms of villains, the only one I can think of is Alexander Usyk, who at least for the time being has put a big hole in a potential Fury Joshua fight. Having said that, even though I'm calling Usyk the villain, he was sensational in a great win over Anthony Joshua in September. So that was it for 2021. Looking forward to 2022.
So, Aidan, let's talk a little boxing there. That's Tom Gray's view. Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk. He was at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Everything was there for Anthony Joshua to hold those belts even longer, but it just wasn't to be. I was really disappointed by the performance. I don't know.
Yeah, I was disappointed. I traced his career back. I was doing some of his earliest interviews back in probably 2013, 14. Anthony wasn't actually sure at that time whether he was going to have a long career in boxing. We even spoke about alternative careers, believe it or not. So he had. I do look back on his career sometimes, and I think to myself, how many elite competitors has he actually fought? I mean, you can only fight in what's in front of you. In your era, there might only be, if you look at Joe Calzaghe, some would argue there weren't any elite fighters in his range to fight. So that's not the fighter's fault. I do think his career progression has been looked after very carefully by Matchroom, as is normal with any stable of fighters in this era. But I look at that Usyk fight in the summer, he didn't look right for it. I almost think that psychologically he was preparing to fight Tyson Fury.
So do you think then, even from watching that fight, you would think that, hold on, your head is thinking about fighting someone else?
Nobody said it. It's just a theory that I had. I'm not a boxing expert. I've never been in the ring in my life, apart from to do a bit of filming. That was it. But
and then you ran out very, very quickly.
Oh yeah, within under a minute. So that was doing well. So I just think that he was. If you can't imagine a more different opponent when you compare Tyson Fury to Alexander Usyk, and some would even say that towards the latter end of the fight, he almost knew he was going to lose.
I'm thinking of at the end of that fight.
He couldn't win.
It was almost like he was trying to box his way. He's almost like, for me, that AJ was trying to prove that he's a great boxer. It's almost like he had to try and prove something. I'm as good a boxer as Tyson Fury is. And when we know how brilliant Tyson is, as a boxer, especially in the heavyweight division. But it was like to put it bluntly, we're just thinking, just try and knock him out.
I know.
But towards the end, it just didn't happen.
He was just
and
too
then we
good.
knew
Usyk
towards
was
the
too
end that
good.
it was going to be Usyk.
Usyk was too good. I honestly believe that, and I think he'll go on and fight Tyson Fury possibly before even Anthony Joshua does. But I look at that division now, and I don't think Wilder's quite done just yet. I think there's one more push to come from him. He's still got that. He didn't perform badly against Fury in the last fight. Where Anthony Joshua goes from now, I'm not necessarily sure, because I think that looked like that was quite a resounding defeat by Usyk actually at White Hart Lane.
I very much hope that we will manage to see that Joshua Fury fight, but I'm very much doubting it.
It's just not as commercially viable. It's still commercially viable, but it's not the reason to fight it right now. If you look at the way Tyson Fury adjusted to having the fight switch, he thought he was fighting AJ forever and a day as well, and then he switches to take Wilder for somebody he's already beaten. Well, he's drawn with and beaten, and he has to beat him again. That's the difference in terms of where they are mentally.
Right, let's move on to rugby anyway. The Lions, that tour that went on to South Africa again, another situation. It was pretty controversial, and we were wondering whether that was going to go ahead because there was COVID outbreaks over there, and it was a very difficult tour for the Lions, and it didn't work out as well for them. And it wasn't again, I mean, I know with the current climate, but it wasn't a typical Lions tour, was it?
No, it wasn't. I mean, you're struggling to think of any serious memories from it, really. I mean, there was an interview with Brian O'Driscoll in the Mirror just about a week ago. He said he didn't even watch some of it. He said the rugby served up wasn't very good. He said there was now obviously the absence of crowd. He felt that the British and Irish Lions faced some pretty substandard opposition prior to taking on the Springboks. So it's beset with problems, and it's unfortunate because some of these tournaments in these conditions have worked. I think that one, I know it's not a tournament, it's a series, obviously, and it goes over a longer period of time, but it just didn't work, did it?
No, I mean, it means the world to players. I mean, it's the ultimate when it comes to playing rugby for home nations, to actually represent the Lions, wear the red shirt, but it just didn't go the way that they wanted it. So
No, not at all, and they were beaten in the last two by South Africa quite comfortably as well, and I don't think anyone will be talking about this in a year's time.
OK, well, I feel almost like we just pretty much had to cover it, so cover it as well as we did there. Let's move on to golf anyway, and another major loss as well. I don't want it to be like all major losses, but listen, we've got to talk about 2021. Ryder Cup year, always a very big one in the world of golf, which we always look forward to, but it just wasn't to be for Team Europe as the US gave him a bit of a beating at Whistling Straits. What about elsewhere? Well, let's ask golf guru Rupert Bell for his pick of 2021.
Well, I have to say, I think it's been an absolutely terrific golfing year. Now, heroes and villains. Well, actually, I'm going to make my first hero Richard Bland. At 48 years of age, and at his 478th attempt, he finally won an event on the European Tour, winning the British Masters at Belfry in May. A fabulous achievement, perseverance writ large across his face. And then he went on to have a terrific year. And after 2 rounds of the US Open, he was even leading, but naturally fell away. And a couple of other heroes, well, obviously Phil Mickelson. What he did at the USPGA was just quite extraordinary. In his 50s, blew the field away. It was a mesmerising performance. I also think Colin Morikawa has been the standout player of the year, and with his performance in the Open Championship was steely, ruthless, fantastic, and Jon Rahm deservedly winning his first major. Well, the villains of the piece, well, I think it's quite simple, really. They're the pantomime villains of world golf. Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau. Their spat, well, it grabbed all the headlines, but they were enjoying probably being the villains of the piece. But it was a fabulous golfing year. But the only disappointment ultimately on the course was the flop from the European Tour team in the Ryder Cup, where they just never turned up at Whistling Straits. Been a fabulous year. Can't wait for 2022.
Well, thanks, Rupert. Still another couple of years, and then we can look forward to another Ryder Cup, of course, which will be in Europe. So maybe there will see a few changes. Aidan, if you're looking back on 2021, who are you going to pick then? I mean, as one of the great success stories that we look back in the past year. Because I've got one and we haven't even mentioned it.
Go on.
Mark Cavendish.
Yeah,
Mark Cavendish.
Absolutely.
Mark Cavendish, great sprinter, great cyclist. See, the thing is, and this is a real story because he's gone into the Tour de France, and trust me, I'm not a cycling specialist, but I know Mark, and he went into 2021, and it looked like the career was over. You know, he'd given interviews in Belgium, and he didn't have a team, and he was in tears, and he was upset, and looked like, anyway, there was an injury to the sprinter in his team. He comes in, nobody expects anything of him. And he wins 4 stages, which is remarkable. And for anybody to win any stage of the Tour de France at any point in their career will make them as a cyclist. He wins 4, equals the great Eddie Merckx as the most stage wins in the Tour de France.
Can I ask you something? You interviewed him recently, didn't you? And although it betrays a lack of knowledge of cycling, I guess, but I'm wondering, I've always wondered, and I remember covering some of his first stage wins sprint wins in 2008. So going back quite a while here, and he kept winning one after one after one after the other, and I was thinking, you know, this is a lot of new fans are coming to cycling. Sure. It annoys him, actually, when journalists don't know much about cycling.
Oh, it does.
But why can't he win the Tour de France? Don't you think they have to adapt the rules slightly?
See, that's the thing. You know, it's the way
you asked him about it, didn't you?
I have asked that because it's the way he's built. You know, and he said, I think the words of Mark Cavendish were, I'm very strong. I've got very strong legs, but I'm like a child from above the waist. So it works very well for sprinting, but when it comes to climbing up mountains, that makes it extremely difficult. So he's never going to win the entire race, but it's all about stage wins for him. So for me, Mark Cavendish, for the story, for the comeback, it's been a great 2021 and hopefully even more stage wins for 2022 because he's been picked up by his team again, so I'd love to see him in the Tour de France. So briefly, who's it going to be for you?
For me, I think it's difficult to see past Novak Djokovic. I know he didn't quite complete the career Grand Slam.
Are you a fan?
Yeah, I am a fan, actually. I've interviewed him a few times at Laureus Awards in the past. He divides opinion a little bit. He doesn't necessarily play with the grace or early in his career he's criticised for not having the fighting spirit.
Doesn't he want to be Roger Federer? Isn't that what it is? He wants to be loved like Roger Federer.
He wants to be loved, yeah, but I think he deserves to be loved as well. I mean, he's taken part in some epic finals in the past. You think back to 2012 at the Australian Open. I mean, I was watching that final between him and Nadal thinking, you know, I got to about the 4th set, tiebreak, and I'm thinking, I can't believe these two are still standing up. And the heat was absolutely stifling. But he's done that again and again and again. He had a lull in his career probably, 3 or 4 years ago. He didn't win anything for a couple of years. And we thought maybe that's him done. But he came back and he won. Well, he's got to 20 again. He's got to 20 just as Roger Federer and Roger Nadal. So Rafa Nadal have done as well. So I think that he deserves to be in there. Yeah, he didn't quite complete the Slam. He's had some criticism recently for his stance over the vaccinations, but I think that's a hell of an achievement to do when you've been doing it for that long, to go and repeat a win at the Australian, a win at Wimbledon and a win at the French. Isn't it a hell of an achievement?
So for people that are rooted in football, then we've done quite well. So I'm saying a cyclist, and you're going to say a tennis player. So they are going to be our big winners of 2021. Looking forward to 2022. Thank you very much, Aidan. That's pretty much it for now. Anyway, what a year it has been, and what a year 2022 is going to be. So much to look forward to. Enjoy the rest of the holidays, and we'll see you in the new year.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.